The bank manager's face went completely white. His hands trembled as he reached for the phone. "Lock the front doors," he told his assistant, "and call the police, now." He looked at me like I had just handed him a live grenade instead of my dead grandfather's old passbook. The same passbook my mother threw in the trash just yesterday, calling it worthless junk that should have stayed buried with him. She was so sure it meant nothing. Turns out, some secrets refuse to stay in the grave, and some of them have teeth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Danica Gross. I'm 31 years old, and until that morning, I thought the most exciting part of my week would be fighting with my landlord about the broken radiator in my apartment. I work as a paralegal at a small law firm in Columbus, Ohio. It's not glamorous. The pay is modest. My car is 12 years old and makes a sound like a dying whale every time I turn left. But I'm good at my job because I notice things. I ask questions. I don't let go until I find answers. My family has always considered this a character flaw. The funeral was on a Tuesday. My grandfather, Eugene Gross, had passed away at 89 years old. He lived on a modest farm about 2 hours outside the city, the kind of place with a wraparound porch and fields that stretched out to the horizon. Everyone assumed he had nothing, just an old man in an old house, living out his final years in quiet simplicity. That's certainly what my mother wanted everyone to believe. The service was small, efficient, and cold, exactly Miriam's style. My mother has always believed that emotions are a form of weakness, and funerals are no exception. She organized the whole thing like a corporate event. 30 minutes for the ceremony, 45 minutes for the reception, and then everyone goes home. No lingering, no unnecessary tears. The catering was from a place that clearly believed mayonnaise was a food group. My grandmother would have risen from her grave just to complain about the potato salad. She had standards. Miriam does not. My brother Wyatt showed up 40 minutes late in a suit that cost more than my car. He said parking was difficult. The farmhouse has a gravel lot the size of a football field, but sure, Wyatt, parking. He barely looked sad. Then again, Wyatt has never been particularly good at emotions that don't directly benefit him. He hugged our mother, shook a few hands, and spent most of the reception checking his phone, probably monitoring his investments. Wyatt loves talking about his investments. I stood in the corner watching my family perform grief like a stage play, and I thought about my grandfather. Eugene Gross was an accountant for 40 years. Numbers were his language. He could look at a spreadsheet and see stories that other people missed. He was also a chess player, and a good one. He taught me to play when I was 7 years old, sitting on that wraparound porch with a board between us and lemonade sweating in the summer heat. He used to say that chess wasn't about the pieces you captured. It was about the positions you created, the traps you set, the patience to wait for your opponent to make a mistake. His favorite saying was this: "The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie." I never understood what he meant by that, not until now. 2 weeks before he died, I visited him at the farmhouse. He was weak, his body was failing, but his eyes were sharp, focused, alive. He grabbed my hand with surprising strength and pulled me close. His voice was barely a whisper, but every word was deliberate. "The passbook," he said, "in my study. The chess book. Only you, Danica. Promise me." I promised. I didn't understand, but I promised. After the funeral service, the family gathered at the farmhouse. Miriam was already walking through the rooms, talking about selling the property, discussing potential buyers, calculating square footage like the body wasn't even cold yet. Wyatt nodded along, occasionally offering suggestions. They had clearly discussed this before, probably while Grandpa was still alive. I slipped away to his study. It was a small room lined with bookshelves smelling of old paper and pipe tobacco. Grandpa hadn't smoked in 20 years, but the scent never left. I found the chess book immediately. Strategic Endgames, A Master's Guide. It was his favorite. We had discussed the positions in that book 100 times. I pulled it from the shelf, and it felt wrong. Too heavy. I opened it, and my heart stopped. The pages had been hollowed out. Inside was an old leather passbook, worn at the edges, the kind of thing you might find in an antique store. It looked ancient, like something from another era. I brought it out to the living room, curious, wanting to share this discovery with my family. That was my mistake. Miriam saw it before I could even speak. Her reaction was immediate. Too fast, too sharp. She crossed the room in 3 steps, snatched it from my hands, and barely glanced at it before throwing it directly into the kitchen trash. "This is garbage," she said. "Old accounts that don't even exist anymore. This should have stayed buried with him. Don't go digging through his things, Danica. It's not appropriate." Wyatt laughed from the couch. "Always the sentimental one, aren't you, Danny?" They exchanged a look, brief, almost invisible, but I saw it. I've spent 8 years working at a law firm. I've seen that look before. It's the look people give each other when they share a secret, when they're afraid someone is getting too close to something they want to keep hidden. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother's reaction. If the passbook was worthless, why was she angry? Why not just dismissive? Why did she need to throw it away so quickly, so decisively? And I kept thinking about my grandfather, his sharp eyes, his deliberate words. He was an accountant for 40 years. He didn't make mistakes with numbers or documents. If he hid that passbook in a chess book and told only me about it, there was a reason. People only react with anger when they have something to hide. At 5 a.m, I made a decision. I was going back to that farmhouse. That passbook was still in the trash, and I was going to find out why my mother wanted it buried so badly. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see everything. Thank you so much for your support. The drive to the farmhouse took 2 hours in the gray light before dawn. I kept the radio off. I needed to think. My grandfather was many things. Patient, methodical, strategic. He spent 40 years as an accountant, tracking numbers, finding discrepancies, documenting everything. He played chess like a man who could see 15 moves ahead. He did not do things randomly. He did not hide passbooks in hollowed-out books and whisper cryptic instructions unless there was a reason. And my mother did not throw things in the trash with that much aggression unless she was afraid. I arrived at the farmhouse just as the first light was breaking over the fields. The sky was painting itself in shades of purple and gold. No other cars. No one else around. Perfect. I let myself in with the spare key that Grandpa kept under the 3rd porch step. The house was silent, still, like it was holding its breath. I went straight to the kitchen. The trash can was exactly where I left it. I pulled out the bag, set it on the floor, and started digging. There I was, a grown woman with a college degree, elbow deep in garbage at 5:30 in the morning like some kind of raccoon in business casual. My grandfather would have been proud. My therapist would have had questions. The passbook was near the bottom, underneath coffee grounds and paper napkins from the funeral reception. I pulled it out, wiped it clean with my sleeve, and examined it properly for the first time. The leather cover was old and worn, made to look like something from decades ago. But when I opened it, something was different. The account number inside didn't match the old-fashioned appearance. The format was wrong. Too many digits. Too modern. And then I found the note. Tucked into the spine of the passbook, folded into a tiny square, was a piece of paper in my grandfather's careful handwriting. Account number 77412289. They don't know about this one. Ask for the full history. Trust no one in the family. Only you, Danica. I read it 3 times. They don't know. Meaning Miriam, meaning Wyatt. My grandfather had hidden something from his own family. He had trusted only me to find it. I took photos of everything. The passbook, the note, the account number. I uploaded them to cloud storage immediately. Working at a law firm teaches you certain habits. Documents can be destroyed. Files can be lost. But digital backups are forever. I drove home with the passbook in my bag and questions burning in my mind. The first call came at 10 in the morning. Miriam. Her voice was sweet, concerned, motherly. Everything she isn't. Just checking on you after yesterday, she said. Such a hard day for all of us. I waited. There was more coming. You didn't take anything from the farmhouse, did you? Everything belongs to the estate now. We need to catalog it properly before the sale. I lied smoothly. Just one of Grandpa's chess books, for memories. There was a pause. I could hear her calculating, deciding whether to push further. Then her voice relaxed. Good, that's fine. But don't go digging through his things anymore, Danica. Some things are better left alone. Your grandfather wasn't, well, he wasn't himself these last few years. His mind was going. He didn't always know what was real and what wasn't. I said nothing, but inside, I was screaming. 2 weeks ago, my grandfather looked me in the eye and gave me specific instructions. The passbook, the chess book, only me. That wasn't a confused old man. That was a man with a plan. That was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The second call came at 7 that evening. Wyatt, my brother, who hadn't voluntarily contacted me in 6 months, suddenly wanted to chat. My brother calling to check on me was about as natural as a cat offering to do your taxes. The last time Wyatt voluntarily contacted me was 3 years ago to ask if I still had Dad's golf clubs. I did. He took them. I never saw them again. Some patterns you learn to recognize. "Hey, Danny," he said, his voice too casual, too friendly. "Mom mentioned you've been asking about Grandpa's stuff. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," I said. "Just processing." He hummed sympathetically, then carefully. "You know, Grandpa didn't really have much, right? The farmhouse, some furniture. Mom and I already talked about it. She's going to handle the sale. I'll take care of the property stuff. You don't need to worry about any of it." And there it was. They had already divided everything. Miriam gets the money. Wyatt gets the property. Danica gets nothing. They assumed I would just accept it. They assumed I wouldn't ask questions. His parting words, "Just let it go, Danny. You know how Mom gets. It's not worth the fight." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and thought about the timing. Miriam called at 10. Wyatt called at 7, 9 hours apart. Almost like they were coordinating. Almost like they were checking what I knew, confirming their stories, making sure their lies were aligned. They were scared of something. This is exactly why I keep records of everything. Every conversation, every date, every detail. Working at a law firm teaches you that memories fade, but documents are forever. I wrote down both calls word for word, time, duration, exact phrases. I looked at the passbook again, at my grandfather's note, at the account number that was too modern for the old leather cover. Tomorrow, I was taking a personal day. I was going to that bank. I was going to find out what my grandfather hid. And whatever my mother was so desperate to keep buried, I was going to drag it into the light. I took a personal day from work, which my boss granted with minimal questions. One of the benefits of never taking time off is that people don't argue when you finally do. The drive to the bank took 2 hours. First Regional Savings had been absorbed by a larger institution years ago, but the main branch still existed in a small town called Millbrook. It was the kind of place with one traffic light and a diner that had probably been serving the same coffee since 1972. I walked into the bank at 9:15 carrying the passbook, my ID, my grandfather's death certificate, and documents proving I was family. I expected nothing, maybe a few $100s in a forgotten account, maybe just answers. The young teller at the counter smiled when I approached. She took the passbook, examined it with polite curiosity, and typed the account number into her computer. Her smile faded. She excused herself, made a phone call in the back, spoke in hushed tones I couldn't hear. 20 minutes passed. I sat in the lobby watching the clock, starting to feel foolish. Maybe Miriam was right. Maybe this was nothing. Maybe I had driven 2 hours for an empty account and a dead end. I sat in that lobby so long I learned the security guard's entire life story. His name was Carl. He was training for a 5K. His wife made him give up bread. I have never seen a man look so sad while standing 3 feet from a bowl of complimentary mints. Then a man in an expensive suit appeared, tall, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that was professionally neutral. He introduced himself as Theodore Calloway, regional manager. He asked me to come to his private office. His hands were slightly unsteady when he took the passbook from me. He examined it like it might explode. Then he sat down heavily in his leather chair and let out a long breath. "Miss Gross," he said carefully, "this account is flagged in our system." I felt my stomach drop. Flagged. That word never means anything good. But he continued. "Not because of anything you've done, because of its history," he explained. The account wasn't from 1962, despite what the old passbook cover suggested. It was opened in 2010. My grandfather had deliberately used the vintage cover to disguise it, to hide it. The account was a savings instrument with compound interest. It had been untouched for 14 years. The current balance was, he wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk, $2,147,832. When I saw that number, I made a sound that I can only describe as what happens when you accidentally sit on a cat. Part gasp, part wheeze, part desperate need to lie down. The bank manager offered me water. I needed something stronger. $2 million. My grandfather, who everyone thought had nothing, who lived in a modest farmhouse and wore the same 3 sweaters for 20 years, had $2 million hidden in an account no one knew about. But Theodore Calloway wasn't celebrating with me. His face was getting more worried, not less. "There's something else," he said. "In 2015, someone attempted to access this account. They had power of attorney documents for Eugene Gross. They had what appeared to be his signature authorizing the transfer. But our verification system flagged inconsistencies in the documents. The signatures didn't quite match our records. The access was denied, and the attempt was logged in our security system." My mouth was dry. "Who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Calloway looked at his papers. The person who attempted access was listed as Miriam Gross. He paused. "Is that a relative of yours?" "My mother. My mother tried to steal this money 9 years ago. She failed, but she tried." Calloway made more calls. More people arrived. A woman from their security division, a man from legal. They pulled records from their archives and from other banks where my grandfather had accounts. The picture that emerged was devastating. My grandfather had money. Significant money, an inheritance from his own parents back in 1995, carefully invested and grown over the years. By 2009, when my father died and Miriam became Grandpa's caretaker, he had accumulated over $1 million across various accounts. Miriam found them, and over 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, she drained them, transfer by transfer, withdrawal by withdrawal, using power of attorney documents and signatures that looked authentic but weren't. She stole approximately $1.5 million from my grandfather, but Eugene was an accountant. He noticed. He couldn't stop her legally because she had convinced the courts he was mentally incompetent. He couldn't go to the police because no one believed a confused old man over his devoted daughter-in-law. He was trapped. So he did the only thing he could do. He hid what was left. In 2010, when he realized what was happening, he secretly opened this account, transferred $1 million into it, used the old passbook cover to disguise it, told no one. This account was his lifeboat, his insurance policy, his final move in a chess game against a woman who had stolen everything else from him. Calloway looked at me with something like respect. "There's one more thing you should know," he said. "In 2019, your grandfather filed a formal complaint with our fraud department. He claimed his daughter-in-law was stealing from him. He said no one would believe him because he had been declared mentally incompetent." He paused. "We couldn't proceed without the original account documentation, without proof that he had assets she wasn't supposed to access, without this." He held up the passbook. "Your grandfather was trying to prove he was being robbed, and now you've just brought us the evidence he couldn't provide while he was alive." I sat in that leather chair holding my dead grandfather's secret, and I finally understood. Eugene hadn't given up. He hadn't surrendered to confusion or despair. He had spent 9 years building a case, preparing evidence, waiting for the right moment, and he had left the key with the one person he trusted to finish what he started, me. Calloway reached for his phone. "Miss Gross," he said, "I need to contact our security division, and I think we'll need to involve law enforcement. This account is evidence of serious financial crimes." I nodded slowly. I had come here expecting nothing. Maybe a few $100s, maybe closure. Instead, I found $2 million and proof that my mother was a thief. And somewhere, I was absolutely certain my grandfather was smiling. If you're still with me on this journey, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means everything to me, And I promise the best part of this story is still coming. The police arrived at the bank within 2 hours of Theodore Calloway's call. 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Division, both carrying notebooks and the kind of expressions that suggested they had seen this before. Elder financial abuse, they called it, one of the fastest-growing crimes in America, and the perpetrators are almost always family. The lead detective was a woman named Tabitha Jefferson, mid-40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. She had been working financial crimes for 15 years, and she told me something that stuck with me. "These cases break my heart every time," she said, "because the victims are trapped. They depend on the people who are stealing from them. They love the people who are hurting them. And when they try to speak up, nobody believes them." She looked at the passbook in my hands. "Your grandfather fought back the only way he could. With documentation, with evidence, with patience." The investigation moved quickly after that. Calloway provided the bank's records. The 2015 access attempt was documented in detail. The forged signatures, the fraudulent power of attorney, the security flags that had stopped the transfer. It was all there, preserved in the bank's digital archives like a fly trapped in amber. But that was just the beginning. 3 days after my visit to the bank, I received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was old but steady. He introduced himself as Lawrence Whitmore, attorney at law, 75 years old, and Eugene Gross's friend for over 40 years. "Your grandfather gave me specific instructions," he said. "If he died, I was to contact you. Only you. No one else in the family." He was very clear about that. I drove to his office that afternoon. It was a small practice in a quiet part of town, the kind of place where lawyers still had wooden bookshelves and framed diplomas from decades past. Whitmore met me at the door. He was tall, slightly stooped with age, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were kind. "Eugene and I played chess together for 40 years, he told me. He was the most methodical man I ever knew. When he came to me in 2020 and told me what was happening, I believed him immediately. Because Eugene didn't make accusations lightly, and he didn't come empty-handed. He led me to his office and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. "Your grandfather spent 4 years building this," he said. He knew no one would believe him while he was alive, so he prepared for after. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was everything. Copies of the forged power of attorney documents, side by side with examples of my grandfather's real signature. The differences were subtle but clear, once you knew what to look for. The loops were too perfect. The pressure was too even. My mother had traced his signature, probably from documents she had access to, and she had done it well enough to fool most people, but not well enough to fool a bank's verification system, and not well enough to fool an accountant who had spent 40 years spotting discrepancies. There were bank statements, transaction records, a detailed log in my grandfather's handwriting, documenting every suspicious withdrawal, every transfer he hadn't authorized, every lie my mother had told to cover her tracks, dates, amounts, account numbers. 4 years of meticulous documentation, and at the bottom of the folder, in a sealed envelope, was a notarized sworn statement dated 2022. I read it slowly, my grandfather's voice echoing in my mind with every word. He described everything. How Miriam had taken control of his finances after his son died in 2009. How she had convinced doctors that he was showing signs of dementia when he wasn't. How she had isolated him from the outside world, controlling his phone calls, his visitors, his access to information. How she had stolen from him systematically for years while pretending to be his devoted caretaker. His final words in the statement hit me like a punch to the chest. "I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I am doing. I am leaving this evidence for my granddaughter Danica because she is the only one who will do what is right. She has always asked the questions that others were afraid to ask. I trust her to finish what I could not." I sat in that office and cried, not from sadness, from something harder to name. Pride, maybe, and grief for all the years he had spent alone, knowing the truth, unable to make anyone believe him. Detective Jefferson called me the next day with more news, and this time it wasn't about my mother. "We've been looking into the money trail," she said, "where the stolen funds went after they left your grandfather's accounts, and we found something interesting about your brother, Wyatt, golden child Wyatt, with his expensive suits and his investment portfolio and his smug certainty that he was better than everyone else. He didn't just receive money from your mother," Jefferson continued. "He created a shell company, Garrett Holdings, LLC, registered using his middle name. Over $600,000 was laundered through that company over 5 years. He wasn't an innocent beneficiary, Miss Gross. He was an active participant in the scheme. My brother, who had called me to tell me to let it go. My brother, who had laughed at me for being sentimental. My brother had helped my mother steal from our grandfather and had built his entire lifestyle on the proceeds. His house, his car, his investments, all of it was stolen money, hidden behind corporate paperwork and family lies. But the revelations weren't finished. Jefferson's team ran background checks on everyone involved. Standard procedure, she said, and they found something in my mother's past that explained everything. In 2002, Miriam's own mother had died. The woman had approximately $200,000 in savings. When the estate was settled, there was almost nothing left. Other family members had suspected something at the time, but they couldn't prove it. The money had simply vanished. My mother had done this before, to her own mother, 20 years before she did it to Eugene. And my grandfather had known. That was why he never trusted her. That was why he had been so careful, so methodical, so prepared. He had seen her pattern. He knew what she was capable of, and he had spent his final years making sure she wouldn't get away with it a second time. Detective Jefferson asked me to cooperate fully with the investigation, which meant keeping quiet. Not warning my mother, not confronting my brother, attending family dinners and pretending everything was normal while the case was built around them. 2 weeks of lies, 2 weeks of sitting across from people who had stolen from my grandfather, smiled at his funeral, and divided his estate like vultures, picking at a carcass. Sunday dinner at my mother's house was torture. My mother's chicken has always been a crime against poultry, but that night it felt appropriate. Here I was, choking down evidence of bad judgment while sitting across from a woman who had made bad judgment her entire career. Miriam talked about the farmhouse sale. She had found a buyer, good price, quick closing. Wyatt nodded along, mentioned a new investment opportunity he was excited about. They were so confident, so certain that they had gotten away with everything. After dinner, Miriam pulled me aside. Her voice was soft, concerned, motherly, the performance of a lifetime. "I know we don't always see eye to eye," she said, "but we're family. Your grandfather would want us to stick together, to support each other." I kept my face neutral. "Of course, Mom, family first." For 2 weeks, I had to pretend I didn't know my mother was essentially a white-collar criminal. Every time she called to complain about her neighbor's lawn or the price of eggs at the grocery store, I wanted to say, "You know what else is expensive, Mom? Federal prison." But I waited. I documented. I trusted the process. My grandfather taught me chess when I was 7. His favorite lesson, the best move isn't always the obvious one. Sometimes you sacrifice a piece to win the game. He had sacrificed his final years setting this trap. He knew he wouldn't see it spring, but he knew I would. The call came on a Thursday morning. Detective Jefferson's voice was calm and professional. "Miss Gross, we're executing the warrants today. Arrests will be simultaneous. I thought you'd want to know." I thanked her, hung up, sat in silence for a long moment. My mother was about to lose everything. My brother was about to learn that betrayal has a price, and my grandfather's patience was finally about to pay off. The arrests happened at 7 in the morning, coordinated to the minute. No warning, no opportunity for them to contact each other, coordinate stories, or destroy evidence. Detective Jefferson had planned it perfectly. I wasn't there. But Jefferson told me the details later, and I have to admit, there was a certain satisfaction in hearing them. My mother answered her door still in her bathrobe, coffee cup in hand. She saw the badges and the uniforms, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I imagine she looked like a woman watching her entire world collapse in slow motion. Detective Jefferson presented the warrant. Read the charges: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, theft. My mother tried one last manipulation. Her voice was steady, reasonable, the voice of a woman who had talked her way out of trouble her entire life. "This is a mistake," she said. "My father-in-law was mentally unwell. He didn't know what he was saying. I was trying to protect him." Jefferson wasn't impressed. "Ma'am, we have 4 years of documented evidence, a notarized statement from your father-in-law, witnessed by an attorney, bank records of your attempted access to an account you didn't know existed, and a paper trail showing exactly where the money went. This isn't a mistake, this is consequences." My mother was handcuffed and walked to the police car. No screaming, no dramatic scene, just the quiet death of a lie that had lasted 15 years. Across town, at the same moment, my brother was in his office. He was in a meeting with clients when the officers walked in. I heard he went completely pale, tried to explain that there must be some confusion, tried to mention his lawyer. The officers weren't interested in negotiation. Wyatt was cuffed in front of his colleagues. His reputation died in that moment. Whatever he had built, whatever image he had cultivated, it was gone. You don't recover from being arrested for money laundering in your own conference room. The case moved through the courts over the following months. I attended some of the hearings. Watched the evidence pile up. Watched my mother's confident expression slowly crumble as the scope of the prosecution's case became clear. Her lawyer tried everything, claimed Eugene was mentally incompetent, so his statement was invalid. The prosecution brought in 3 doctors who had examined my grandfather over the years. All 3 testified that Eugene showed no signs of dementia. He was sharp, coherent, aware. The incompetency ruling, they explained, had been based on false information provided by Miriam herself. She had convinced the courts that her father-in-law was losing his mind so that no one would believe him when he said she was stealing from him. The judge was not sympathetic. Wyatt's lawyer tried a different approach. He came to me privately with an offer. Wyatt would testify against our mother in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed he had been manipulated, that he didn't know the full scope of what was happening, that he was a victim too. The lawyer delivered Wyatt's message carefully. "Your brother says he wants to make things right. He's willing to cooperate fully." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Tell my brother that our grandfather taught me chess," I said. "And in chess, you don't negotiate with pawns." It didn't matter anyway. The prosecutors weren't interested in Wyatt's cooperation. The shell company proved he wasn't a passive recipient of family generosity. He had created corporate structures to hide stolen money. He had signed documents. He had made transfers. He knew exactly where the money came from, and he had helped conceal it. No deal, full charges. The sentencing hearing was on a cold day in February, 3 months after the arrests. Federal courthouse, wood-paneled walls, the American flag hanging behind the judge's bench. Before the sentences were read, the prosecutor asked to present a statement from the victim, from Eugene. The courtroom went quiet as she read his words aloud. "My daughter-in-law stole my money and my dignity. She convinced the world I was losing my mind while she emptied my life savings. No one believed me, but I am not confused. I know exactly what is being done to me, and I am leaving a record so that one day the truth will come out." I watched my mother's face as those words filled the room. She stared straight ahead, expressionless, but her hands were shaking. Wyatt wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident, successful brother who had always looked down on me was gone. In his place was just a man who had bet everything on a lie and lost. The judge delivered the sentences. Miriam Gross, 7 years in federal prison, no possibility of early parole, full restitution ordered. Everything she owned would be liquidated and returned to the estate. Wyatt Gross, 3 years in federal prison. Felony conviction that would follow him for the rest of his life. His investment career, his professional reputation, his carefully constructed image of success. All of it was over. I sat in that courtroom and felt something I didn't expect. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet sense of completion, like a book finally reaching its last chapter. After the hearing, Detective Jefferson found me in the hallway. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said. "He fought for years. You finished it." I thanked her, shook her hand, walked out of the courthouse into the cold February air. Later, Wyatt's lawyer called me one more time, asked if I would consider visiting my brother in prison. He said Wyatt wanted to apologize, wanted to explain. I said I would think about it. Wyatt's lawyer actually asked if I'd visit him in prison. I said I'd think about it. I'm still thinking. It's been 6 months. I'll probably keep thinking. Some apologies come too late to matter. Some explanations don't deserve to be heard. My phone buzzed. A text from Lawrence Whitmore, my grandfather's attorney. Your grandfather left something else for you. One final item. When you're ready, come to my office. One more surprise. One more move from beyond the grave. Eugene wasn't finished yet. I visited Lawrence Whitmore's office 2 days after the sentencing. The February wind was bitter, but the sun was bright, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Whitmore was waiting for me with tea and a single envelope on his desk. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's careful handwriting. He asked me to give this to you after everything was resolved, Whitmore said. He was very specific about the timing. He wanted you to read it when you could appreciate what it meant. I took the envelope. It felt light, just paper, but I knew it contained something heavy. Before I opened it, Whitmore explained the legal outcome. The $2.1 million in the hidden account was now mine. Eugene's will, kept safely with Whitmore for years, explicitly named me as the sole beneficiary. My mother and brother were specifically excluded, with documentation explaining why. Additionally, the restitution process had begun. Assets seized from Miriam and Wyatt would be liquidated and added to the estate. The farmhouse sale proceeds, which my mother had planned to keep for herself, would come to me instead. Total inheritance, once everything was processed, would be approximately $2.5 million. I nodded, but the money felt abstract, distant. What I really wanted was in that envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside were 2 pages, covered front and back in my grandfather's handwriting. The letter was dated 1 month before his death. My dearest Danica, it began. If you're reading this, then you found the passbook. You followed the trail. You did what I knew you would do. I want you to understand why I chose you. Your brother was always his mother's son. I watched him grow up learning her values, taking shortcuts, believing that the ends justify the means. I hoped he would change, but hope is not a strategy. An accountant knows better than to trust hope. Your mother never loved me. She loved what I represented: security, respectability, access to resources she could control. When your father died, God rest his soul, she saw an opportunity. An old man with money and no one to protect him. She thought I was an easy target. She was wrong. I knew what she was doing almost from the beginning. I'm an accountant, Danica. I spent 40 years tracking numbers, finding discrepancies, identifying fraud. Did she really think I wouldn't notice my own money disappearing? But I was trapped. She had the legal authority. She had convinced everyone that I was losing my mind. Every time I tried to fight back, she tightened her grip. Every time I tried to speak up, she silenced me. So I did what I do best. I documented, I prepared, I waited. The truth is patient, Danica. It can wait longer than any lie. I hid what I could, built the evidence, left instructions with Lawrence, and I trusted you to finish what I started. You were always different from the rest of them. You visited me because you wanted to, not because you expected something. You played chess with me for the game, not for the inheritance. You asked questions that made your mother uncomfortable. You never accepted easy answers. That's why I chose you, because I knew that when you found the passbook, you wouldn't stop until you found the truth. And I knew that when you found the truth, you would do what was right. I'm sorry for the burden I've left you. I'm sorry you have to be the one to expose your own family. I know it won't be easy. I know there will be pain. But I also know that you're strong enough to carry it. Live well, Danica. Use the money for something that matters. Build something that lasts. Be happy. I spent my last years fighting a battle I couldn't win, but I made sure you would win it for me. Thank you for being the granddaughter I always hoped for. With all my love, Grandpa Eugene. I sat in Lawrence Whitmore's office and let the tears come. Not sad tears. Something deeper. Something that felt like healing. My grandfather had seen me. Really seen me. In a family where I had always felt like an outsider, he had recognized something true in me. And he had trusted me with the most important thing he had left. Not just money, justice. That was 6 months ago. I quit my job at the law firm, paid off my debts, Bought a small building downtown, a narrow storefront with big windows and good light. I opened a bookshop, the kind of place with comfortable chairs and the smell of coffee and shelves full of stories waiting to be discovered. I named it Gross Pages, which my grandfather would have found hilarious. He always appreciated a good pun. In the back corner, there's a chess table, 2 chairs, a board with the pieces set up and ready. Sometimes customers sit down and play. Sometimes I join them. Above the table hangs a framed photograph of my grandfather, and next to it, in a simple wooden frame, his favorite saying, "The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie." My mother writes letters from prison sometimes, long, rambling letters full of blame and excuses and demands for forgiveness. She says I betrayed the family. She says I ruined everything. She says I owe her. I don't respond. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. Wyatt's wife divorced him. His friends disappeared. When he gets out of prison, he'll have a felony record and nothing to show for all those years of supposed success. The people who had everything because they stole it now have nothing. And me? I have a bookshop. I have peace. I have the knowledge that my grandfather spent his final years fighting for justice, and I was the one who delivered it. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.